Picture this scenario. You finally hit your first $1 million. Maybe it took you 5 years of grinding, saving every penny, building that side business, or maybe you got lucky with some investments. Either way, you're sitting there looking at your bank account with 7 figures staring back at you, and the first thing you want to do is tell someone. Your parents, your best friend, maybe post something cryptic on social media about how hard work pays off. But what if I told you that the moment you open your mouth about your wealth, you've just made the biggest financial mistake of your life? Most people think money problems end when you get money, but here's something that's going to mess with your head. The real problems actually begin the moment other people find out you have it. My name is Alex, and I spend way too much time studying the psychology of wealth and why some people keep their money while others watch it disappear faster than it came. If you've ever wondered why lottery winners go broke or why celebrities end up bankrupt despite earning millions, this video is going to change how you think about wealth forever. Here's a statistic that should terrify anyone who's trying to build wealth. According to financial advisors who work exclusively with high net worth individuals, nearly 78% of wealthy people report that their biggest regret wasn't a bad investment or a failed business venture. It was telling the wrong person about their financial success. Think about that for a moment. These are people who've made it, who've achieved what most of us are working toward, and their biggest mistake wasn't financial, it was social. Now, before we dive into why keeping your wealth secret is absolutely critical, let me paint you a picture of what happens when you don't. You know that friend who always seems to be struggling financially? The one who's constantly complaining about bills, talking about how unfair life is, posting about how the rich keep getting richer while everyone else suffers. Well, the moment they find out you've got money, something fascinating happens to their brain chemistry. And I mean this literally. Neuroscientists have discovered that when people learn someone in their social circle has significantly more money than them, their brain actually triggers the same response as physical pain. The anterior cingulate cortex lights up like a Christmas tree. This isn't jealousy in some abstract sense. This is your friend's brain, literally interpreting your success as an attack on their well-being. And here's where it gets really interesting. Their brain doesn't just register pain, it starts looking for ways to eliminate the source of that pain. Suddenly, that friend who used to compliment your work ethic is now telling everyone how you probably got lucky or how you must have had help from your parents. The colleague who used to grab coffee with you is now making snide comments about how money changes people. Your family members start expecting you to pick up every dinner tab and get genuinely offended when you don't. But this is just the beginning of your problems. Let me tell you about something called the wealth target phenomenon. The moment people know you have money, you become a walking ATM in their minds. And I'm not talking about obvious requests for loans, though those will definitely come. I'm talking about the subtle ways people start treating you differently that slowly drain your wealth without you even realizing it's happening. Your friends start suggesting more expensive restaurants because they know you can afford it. Family members begin expecting extravagant gifts for birthdays and holidays. People stop offering to split bills or pay their share because clearly you don't need the money. Acquaintances start approaching you with investment opportunities that are basically scams designed to separate wealthy people from their money. And here's the kicker. If you don't go along with these new expectations, you're suddenly the selfish rich person who's forgotten where they came from. But the psychological manipulation goes even deeper than that. There's something called the prosperity guilt trap, and it's designed specifically to make wealthy people feel bad about their success. People will start making comments about how you've changed, how money has made you different, how you don't understand what normal people go through anymore. They'll share articles about wealth inequality and make pointed comments about how some people have too much while others have nothing. They'll tell stories about their own financial struggles with just enough detail to make you feel guilty for not offering to help. Here's what's really happening in these situations. These people aren't actually trying to make you a better person or teach you about social responsibility. They're trying to make you feel bad enough about your wealth that you'll start giving it away to make yourself feel better. And the crazy part is, it works. Wealthy people who talk openly about their money give away significantly more of it to friends and family members than those who keep their wealth private. Not to legitimate charities or causes they care about, but to people who manipulate their guilt and social pressure. Now, let me share something that most financial advisors won't tell you because it sounds too harsh. The people who pressure you to share your wealth rarely do anything productive with the money you give them. That friend who needs help with rent this month will need help again next month. The family member who wants you to invest in their business idea has probably never successfully managed money in their life. The acquaintance who's asking for a loan to get back on their feet has a history of financial decisions that led them to need loans in the first place. This isn't about being heartless or selfish. This is about understanding a fundamental truth about money and human behavior. When people receive money they didn't earn, they tend to treat it differently than money they worked for. Psychologists call this the effort justification effect. Money that comes from your own work feels valuable because you know what it cost you to earn it. Money that comes from someone else feels less valuable because it didn't cost you anything to obtain it. Think about your own relationship with money for a moment. How do you treat the $20 you earned versus the $20 someone gave you? Most people spend gifted money more freely, save it less often, and generally treat it as less precious than money they earned themselves. Now imagine this effect scaled up to thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. When you give money to people who didn't earn it, you're essentially teaching them that money can appear without effort, which makes them more likely to spend it carelessly and more likely to come back asking for more. But here's where this gets really insidious. The people asking for your money aren't necessarily bad people trying to take advantage of you. Most of them genuinely believe they deserve your help. In their minds, you have more than you need, they have less than they need, so obviously the fair thing is for you to share. They've convinced themselves that this isn't charity or even a favor. It's justice. You're simply correcting an unfair distribution of resources. This is why keeping your wealth secret isn't just about protecting your money. It's about protecting your relationships. When people don't know you have money, they treat you like a normal person. They split bills fairly. They don't expect expensive gifts. They don't approach you with sob stories designed to open your wallet. Your friendships remain based on genuine connection rather than what you can provide financially. Your family relationships stay normal instead of becoming complicated by expectations and resentment. There's also something else most people don't consider about wealth and secrecy. The moment you start talking about your money, you become a target for financial predators. These aren't just obvious scammers trying to steal your bank account information. These are sophisticated individuals who specialize in separating wealthy people from their assets through seemingly legitimate means. Investment advisors who charge excessive fees for subpar returns. Real estate agents who steer you toward overpriced properties because they know you can afford them. Business partners who propose ventures where they contribute ideas while you contribute capital. Service providers who automatically quote higher prices because they know you won't negotiate. Insurance salespeople who convince you to buy unnecessary policies with massive commissions built in. These people are everywhere, and they have one thing in common. They're extremely good at identifying who has money and who doesn't, but they're not psychic. They rely on signals that wealthy people give off, and the biggest signal is simply talking about your financial success. The moment you mention your investment portfolio at a dinner party, or complain about your tax bill, or casually reference your net worth, you've just painted a target on your back that can take years to remove. Years to remove. The sophisticated financial predators I'm talking about don't approach you with obvious scams. They come to you through mutual friends, at networking events, through professional referrals. They present themselves as successful entrepreneurs or experienced investors who want to include you in exclusive opportunities. They speak your language, they understand your world, and they make you feel special for being chosen to participate in their deals. Here's how it typically works. You mention your financial success to someone you trust. That person mentions it to someone they know. Eventually, word gets to someone who makes a living targeting wealthy individuals. Suddenly, you're getting invited to private investment seminars, exclusive real estate opportunities, and business ventures that promise extraordinary returns with minimal risk. These predators are patient. They might spend months building a relationship with you before they ever mention money. They'll start by offering you legitimate advice or small favors. They'll introduce you to other successful people, invite you to exclusive events, make you feel like you're part of an inner circle of sophisticated investors. By the time they present their opportunity, you trust them completely. You've seen them interact with other wealthy people. You've heard success stories from their previous deals, and everything seems perfectly legitimate. But here's the thing about financial predators that makes them so dangerous. They don't need to steal all your money to be successful. They just need to convince you to invest a portion of it in something that generates huge fees or commissions for them while providing mediocre returns for you. Maybe it's a real estate syndication where they collect management fees, regardless of performance. Maybe it's an investment fund with a 2 and 20 fee structure that charges you whether the investments make money or not. Maybe it's a business partnership where they get paid consulting fees while you provide all the capital. These arrangements can drain hundreds of thousands of dollars from your wealth over time without you even realizing what's happening. You're not losing money in obvious ways like a Ponzi scheme or a complete fraud. You're losing money through death by 1,000 cuts, excessive fees, poor returns, and unfavorable deal structures that heavily favor the person who introduced you to the opportunity. Now, let me tell you about something even more subtle that happens when people know about your wealth. It's called lifestyle inflation pressure, and it's probably responsible for more destroyed fortunes than any investment loss or business failure. When people know you're wealthy, they start expecting you to live like a wealthy person. Not because they care about your happiness or lifestyle, but because seeing wealthy people spend money makes them feel better about their own financial situations. Your friends start suggesting you upgrade your car because the one you're driving doesn't match your net worth. Family members make comments about how you could afford a nicer house in a better neighborhood. Colleagues question why you're still shopping at regular stores when you could afford designer brands. Social media makes this pressure even worse because people expect your lifestyle to match the success they think you've achieved. The insidious part is that this pressure works. Most people who accumulate wealth eventually start spending more money to meet other people's expectations of how wealthy people should live. They buy bigger houses, more expensive cars, designer clothes, luxury vacations, and exclusive experiences, not because these things make them happier, but because they feel pressured to live up to their wealthy image. Here's the mathematical reality of lifestyle inflation that most people never calculate. Let's say you have $1 million invested generating 8% annually. That's $80,000 in passive income before taxes. But if you upgrade your lifestyle to match what people expect from a millionaire, your expenses might jump from $50,000 annually to $150,000 annually. Suddenly, your investments aren't generating enough to cover your lifestyle, so you start spending your principal. Within a few years, your $1 million is gone, and you're back to depending on earned income to maintain a lifestyle you can't actually afford. This is exactly what happens to most lottery winners, professional athletes, and anyone who experiences sudden wealth. They don't lose their money through bad investments or business failures. They lose it by trying to live up to other people's expectations of how wealthy people should spend money. The pressure to upgrade their lifestyle becomes so intense that they spend themselves back into poverty. But there's something even more psychological happening here that most people never recognize. When you tell people about your wealth, you're not just sharing information, you're changing the fundamental dynamic of every relationship you have. Money creates power imbalances, and power imbalances create resentment, manipulation, and conflict. Think about how you feel around someone who makes significantly more money than you do. Even if they're perfectly nice people who never mention their wealth, there's always this underlying awareness that they have options you don't have. They can quit jobs you'd never quit, buy things you'd never buy, take risks you'd never take. This awareness affects how you interact with them, what you expect from them, and how you interpret their behavior. Now imagine being on the other side of that dynamic. Every conversation becomes loaded with subtext about money. People analyze your decisions through the lens of your wealth. If you don't want to go to an expensive restaurant, it's not because you're not in the mood for fancy food. It's because you're being cheap despite having money. If you choose not to help someone financially, it's not because you have legitimate reasons. It's because you're selfish and have forgotten where you came from. Your success becomes a constant source of tension in your relationships, even when nobody's talking about money directly. People start keeping score of what you do with your wealth, judging whether you're generous enough, grateful enough, or humble enough. They expect you to be eternally thankful for your success and constantly willing to share the benefits with others. Here's something that might shock you about human psychology and money. Research shows that people actually prefer to be around others who have slightly less money than they do, rather than slightly more money. It's not because they're bad people or because they don't want others to succeed. It's because being around wealthier people triggers feelings of inadequacy and social anxiety that most people find uncomfortable. When you tell people about your wealth, you're essentially asking them to be uncomfortable around you. You're creating a situation where every interaction is colored by this awareness of financial inequality. Even people who genuinely care about you will start feeling awkward and self-conscious in your presence because they're constantly aware of the gap between your resources and theirs. This is why many wealthy people report feeling lonely and isolated despite having more resources than ever before. It's not because money inherently makes people antisocial. It's because revealing their wealth changed how everyone around them behaved. Friendships that used to feel natural and easy became complicated and loaded with expectations. Family relationships that used to be based on love and shared history became transactional and tense. The isolation gets worse when you realize that keeping wealth secret isn't just about avoiding the immediate problems I've mentioned. It's about preserving something much more valuable than money itself: your sense of identity and purpose. When people know you're wealthy, they stop seeing you as a person with thoughts, feelings, dreams, and struggles. You become a walking bank account with a personality attached. Every conversation gets filtered through the lens of your net worth. When you express an opinion about politics or social issues, people dismiss your perspective because obviously you don't understand what regular people go through. When you complain about work stress or relationship problems, people roll their eyes because how hard can life be when you have money? When you achieve something professionally, people attribute it to your wealth rather than your skills or effort. This is what psychologists call wealth dehumanization, and it's one of the most damaging effects of financial transparency. People stop relating to you as a complete human being with the full spectrum of human experiences. Instead, you become a one-dimensional character whose only defining characteristic is having money. Your struggles don't count because you're wealthy. Your achievements don't matter because you could afford to take risks others couldn't. Your emotions aren't valid because money should solve all your problems. But here's something even more twisted about how society treats wealthy people who are open about their success. The same people who pressure you to share your wealth will simultaneously resent you for having it. They'll make you feel guilty for not giving them money, but they'll also judge you for being wealthy in the first place. It's a psychological trap where you can never win. You're either selfish for not sharing enough, or you're showing off for having money at all. This creates what I call the wealth shame spiral. You start feeling guilty about your success, so you try to hide it or downplay it, but hiding it makes you feel dishonest, and downplaying it makes you feel like you're not being authentic. Meanwhile, people are still treating you differently because they know you have money, but now they're also treating you differently because they think you're ashamed of your success. The truth is, there's no socially acceptable way to be wealthy in most social circles. People want you to be grateful, but not proud, generous, but not flashy, humble, but not self-deprecating, available to help, but not condescending about it. It's an impossible balance that leaves most wealthy people feeling like they're constantly walking on eggshells around the people they care about. Here's where the psychology gets really fascinating, though. The people who handle wealth secrecy best aren't necessarily the most disciplined or the most antisocial. They're the ones who understand that keeping wealth private isn't about being secretive or deceptive. It's about maintaining normal human relationships in a world where money makes normal relationships almost impossible. Think about it this way. When you meet someone new, do you immediately tell them your salary, your debt levels, your investment portfolio balance, or your credit score? Of course not. Financial information is inherently private, and there's nothing dishonest about keeping it that way. But somewhere along the line, people develop this idea that financial success should be shared and celebrated publicly, even though doing so creates more problems than it solves. The wealthy individuals who successfully maintain long-term relationships and protect their assets have learned to separate their financial identity from their personal identity. They don't define themselves by their net worth, and they don't let others define them that way either. They can be generous when they choose to be, but they don't feel obligated to constantly prove their generosity to validate their right to have money. This brings us to something that might be the most important aspect of wealth secrecy. It's not just about protecting yourself from financial predators or manipulative family members. It's about protecting your ability to make rational financial decisions without emotional manipulation and social pressure, influencing every choice you make. When people know you have money, every financial decision becomes a public referendum on your character. If you buy something expensive, you're wasteful or showing off. If you don't buy something someone thinks you should want, you're cheap or ungrateful. If you invest conservatively, you're not taking advantage of your opportunities. If you take risks, you're being reckless with your good fortune. This constant scrutiny makes it almost impossible to make financial decisions based on your actual goals, values, and circumstances. Instead, you end up making decisions based on what will generate the least criticism from the people around you. You start spending money to avoid being called cheap. You start avoiding investments to avoid being called greedy. You start giving money away to avoid being called selfish. But here's something that will really mess with your head about wealth and secrecy. The people who are most vocal about wealth inequality and the obligation of rich people to share their money are usually the least generous with their own resources. Studies show that people who complain most about wealthy people not paying their fair share typically donate the smallest percentage of their own income to charity. This isn't about hypocrisy in some moral sense. It's about human psychology. It's much easier to demand that other people be generous with money you don't have than it is to be generous with money you do have. When someone pressures you to share your wealth, they're not necessarily operating from a place of genuine concern for social justice. They might just be operating from a place of personal frustration about their own financial situation. Understanding this doesn't make you cynical or heartless. It makes you realistic about human nature and better equipped to make decisions that actually align with your values rather than other people's expectations. When you keep your wealth private, you can choose to be generous on your own terms for causes you actually care about in ways that make sense for your situation. The most successful wealth preservation strategies I've seen involve what I call strategic invisibility. These people live comfortable but not ostentatious lifestyles. They drive reliable cars that don't scream expensive. They live in nice homes that don't look like mansions. They dress well, but not in ways that broadcast luxury brands. They can afford almost anything they want, but they choose things that don't advertise their wealth to everyone around them. This isn't about being ashamed of success or living below your means to an extreme degree. It's about understanding that most of the things wealthy people buy to signal their wealth don't actually make them happier. They just make them targets for the problems we've been discussing throughout this entire conversation. Here's something that might surprise you about the wealthiest families in America. The ones who've maintained their wealth across multiple generations rarely live in ways that would make you immediately identify them as wealthy. They understand that true wealth is about having options and security, not about impressing other people with expensive possessions. These families have learned that the most expensive thing you can buy isn't a luxury car or a mansion or a yacht. It's the social problems that come with letting everyone know you can afford luxury cars, mansions, and yachts. The maintenance costs of managing other people's expectations and emotions about your wealth can be higher than the maintenance costs of any material possession. So here's the bottom line that's going to save you from making the biggest financial mistake of your life. Your wealth is nobody else's business, and keeping it that way isn't selfish, it's strategic. The moment you start talking about your money is the moment you start losing it, whether through manipulation, pressure, predators, or just the simple human tendency to spend more when people expect you to live like you're rich. The wealthiest people I know drive 10-year-old cars, live in modest homes, and the only people who know about their net worth are their accountants and their lawyers. Your bank account balance should be as private as your medical records, and for exactly the same reason. It's personal information that can be used against you if it falls into the wrong hands. Build your wealth quietly, enjoy it privately, and let everyone else keep guessing. Trust me, your future self will thank you for keeping your mouth shut today.